What's an early sign that someone's a bad person? Being greedy when they know other people most likely haven't even got their fill yet, i.e., taking a whole half of a pizza to yourself at a pizza party. Another is someone showing out in front of other people but acting like quote unquote normal when it's just you and them. Them throwing the meanest stray at you for no reason when they argue with someone else about something that had nothing to do with you. Being overall judgmental and being able to ask someone for something but they can't ask you for anything. Yes, I've experienced all of these. Yikes, sounds like this person needs to be issued a lifetime membership to the I'm always right and also taking the last slice club. Story 2. I'm in the music biz and there are people who can just get a tiny bit of success and then you pretty much treat everyone like, if you're not someone advancing my career, you don't exist. It's pretty easy to spot because they straight up ignore you until someone else points out who you are or who you know, and then it's, oh, hey, nice to meet you. We should do a show together. Oh, there's some crap. Clout chasers are vapid people. Story 3. They go out of their way to put others down just to feel better about themselves. I used to have a friend who would always bring up something negative when I shared something positive in my life. Even though he comes from a wealthy family that paid for everything and I had to pay my own way through life, he still made negative comments towards me every time I succeeded in something, like finding a summer job, having a nice chat with someone from high school, bringing up a fun memory, etc. I was pretty ignorant back then. Being brought up by cruel parents, I thought people like him were actually what friends were supposed to be like because I hadn't learned what caring people were supposed to be like. Story 4. They blindly believe Reddit advice and apply it everywhere in their day-to-day real life. Like, reflect on this post. If you try to hold yourself up to the exact standards of these comments, it's an impossible expectation because these largely come down to other people's judgments that are out of your control. Social media tends to overinflate interactions and judgment to the extreme. In real life, for the most part, these things do not matter. People aren't consciously trying to slight others, they just have different cultures and focus on different aspects of their day-to-day lives that are important to them. No one knows what circumstances everyone else is experiencing. To cultivate the idea of what a bad person is loaded. Who are we to make that judgment? It'd be nice if people stopped trying to sit on a moral high horse and remember that humans are humans. Story 5. Lying and not admitting wrongdoing when caught, lying consistently and constantly, manipulating things out of context, cruelty and sometimes even indifference to animals, laughing at animals, getting hurt or scared, making jokes about animals being ended, etc. Intentionally and knowingly doing things that directly harm someone else, physically, mentally, career, etc. for their own gain. Consistent lack of common courtesy, inappropriate behavior and language, supporting lawlessness. I could go on for days, but these were the first to come to mind. Story 6. Red flags of someone not being a good person for me are when their words and actions do not match up, casual lying, nothing is ever their fault, refusal to accept responsibility, being able to lie to themselves, in caps because it's a huge one. People who can manipulate their own mind/justify are some of the most dangerous people on earth. Arrogance, inability to listen, too many details, shows manipulative tendencies, passive-aggressive behaviors, how they treat waitstaff, types of friends, making fun of people. There's probably more, but my brain is fried right now. Story 7. I feel like this question lacks any and all nuance, and I don't mean this to be like rude towards OP, but I just think people aren't this simple. People aren't bad or good. People do good and bad things. A lot of the posts on here are things that I think everyone does to some degree. For example, they always come up with excuses. I for sure have people in my life who would say this applies to me, but I think I also have people who would say that I am quick to apologize and take responsibility for actions. At the end of the day, my relationship with everyone is different, so I don't think any of these actions make you quote-unquote bad. Story 8. No long-term friends. If I meet someone and learn they don't have friendships older than 2 years, I'm out. If they just move states or countries, most people will still retain a few long-term friendships, even at long distances, and with less interactions, for example, occasional phone calls. I understand there will be some exceptions to my rule, but I find them to be few and far between. Even if it was a positive thing for them to break ties with everyone in their life, they still made decisions that brought them to the point of being in that situation. I understand we all make mistakes, but I am no longer willing to be part of someone turning a new page in their relationships. Thanks, lots of therapy. Because it's unlikely most people do the work required to be successful at first. I have met some of the most unhinged and or energy-draining people who, quote, were making positive changes in their lives after realizing their friendship groups were toxic. Whether or not that person's friendships were the problem, that person was actually the toxic one, or it was a combination of both. The shared truth for all of these people with no long-term friendships has continued to be that these people have major issues with boundaries. For example, breaking others' boundaries or letting people continually break their own boundaries. And that always continues to cause issues no matter where they go until they do significant work on themselves over time. Story 9. I've been called a bad person, and I do know I've done bad and stupid things to people I cared for. It's subtle. So I might want to say, not paying attention. Like the bad stuff I've done, it's because of not caring/slash paying attention. Just acknowledging it was bad because I got called out. Listen to people. Sometimes we make mistakes and they are shouting out to please stop doing it, but you're so much into yourself. I'm totally changing and trying to be better, but listen. It's no excuse to be a schmuck just because you are not listening. Story 10. When they were too excited to be your friend in the weird obsessed kind of way, I call it friend love bombing. It's like love bombing, but in a friendship way, if that makes sense. I've noticed people who are like this asking, are we friends every 5 minutes? Asking you weird or personal questions all the time, being weird with you in general, all in a somewhat subtle way, are manipulators. All relationships I've had that are like that ended up with them bullying me or enabling bullying to happen to me or riling me up so that I have an autistic meltdown just for craps and giggles to paint me as a villain. Story 11. Virtue signaling. 3 examples from my own life. My friend's ex-wife was super good at this, but got caught basically cheating on him with a dude who looked like your stereotypical brony. My friend is pretty good looking and deserved better than her. A former friend of mine did this super elaborate thing where he claimed to be speaking up for disabled people while hurling around ableist slurs at people who didn't agree with him. I saw that the person who he partnered with was a person he worked with at a movie theater who had suffered a stroke and had brain damage. I wasn't sure if he knew he was being strung along in this guy's clout-chasing campaign. An ex of mine who I had in high school pretended to be kind to Ellen DeGeneres-like levels, but would rip on anyone she had an issue with, even with her own friends. Years later, she transferred to my college to take my major. I had to pretty much prepare for her faked act. I was already really popular on campus, so I had more control of the narrative and was able to turn popular opinion against her. It helped that I was part of a lot of official and quote-unquote official student activities as well. Moral of the story, don't virtue signal. Story 12. It's been my experience that anyone who makes a show of living by a code, anyone who speaks a lot of words while saying nothing, anyone who says, I don't know what you want me to say, anyone who has a short fuse, maybe even brags about it, has an explosive temper, or is outright violent, anyone who insists you can trust them instead of letting trust develop, anyone who doesn't respect that no is a complete sentence, anyone who manipulates you into apologizing when you're the one who is wronged, anyone who is an intellectual bully, introduces themselves with their IQ or mentions Mensa membership or an invite before you get to know them or before it's even relevant to a conversation. Anyone who is an emotional bully, anyone who boasts about never apologizing, anyone who doesn't show you kindness, respect, and compassion, anyone who doesn't respect and encourage you to grow, should be kept all at a distance. You deserve the same kindness that you show others. Story 13. As an introvert and empath, I learned early on who to avoid. Not following through on what you said you'd do, empty promises, saying they'll hang out with you but never do, always too busy or stressed, especially when you're the person who always asks to hang out, one-sided deals. Stay as your friend for only a period of time, but when something changes in their life, having a kid, a breakup, etc., proceeding to drop you like you're nothing. People who have no problem treating you like crap, but everyone else sees them as a saint, angel, kind, etc., because they don't know your perspective, and you know they won't believe you. Good old narcissistic behavior. Doing kind things for them, but they never once return the favor. There's more, but those are the main ones to me. Story 14. They come in various flavors of badness. The in-your-face bad person. They have no life outside of the workplace. They run to management and spy on other employees. Basically, the employment version of an institutionalized criminal. They have nothing left in the real world, so they want to be heard, and it's the management that only listens to them. They basically burn their bridges with anyone and everyone outside. Sign, easiest one to spot. If it's a work environment, others will say, avoid that one. If they complain and everyone's a target except you, then when you leave the room, you're the next target. The overgiving bad person, usually a self-proclaimed good Christian, religious type, who will cast up all the good they've done if they don't get their own way. Shallow and self-serving to the core, disguised as charity, will bully behind the scenes. Sign, giving way too much and says, I'm a good person. They aren't. The professional victim, basically the type of person you see when they need something, always obsessive about themselves on social media and or their self-image. If the world can't serve them, they aren't worth it. And if they are charming until you're no more use to them and they cut people off without a second thought. Sign, no capacity to look at their past actions and think negatively about themselves. It's everyone else's fault, but really it's them that have the problem. The sadistic comedian, the person who gets pleasure from making others feel miserable or stressed. It's a big web and they're the spider at the center causing trouble. Anyone can be a target, family, friends, children, fellow employees, all masked under their sense of humor. Sign, not many because they keep it hidden and are triply clever at what they do. Probably how family react to them. Most people outside of a family setting will see them as a wonderful person. That's off the top of my head, and yes, I've met all of these and had the last one as an uncle. Story 15. They have a long list of tragic things happening to them from multiple people over and over their entire life, and not once have they ever been slightly at fault and were just the poor innocent victim of everyone around them all the time. I know someone like this. They are utterly incapable of taking responsibility for anything. Everything is someone else's fault. Nothing they do or say is ever the reason. And they will twist every single thing to make themselves the perpetual 24/7, 365 victim. They also throw everyone around them under the bus the millisecond they can gain something from doing so, and then trash that person to everyone around them. For some reason, nobody ever believes a person she does this to until she does it to them. Basically, if someone comes off as this nice, caring, innocent person and everyone in their life forever has always screwed them over, you're probably dealing with a narcissist and you're the next victim. Story 16. The answers here are always saying you're a good person or always being the victim. I don't disagree, but for some people, this is their reality. I've never intentionally hurt anyone in my life, but I've been wronged more than the average person. And once you've been wronged again and again, at some point your naive butt starts to realize, wow, so many people are so heartless. Why am I kinder than all of these people I've met? I don't brag about being a good person, but it's something I finally realized, and it's not always a good feeling. Story 17. Maybe not a bad person, but definitely a type of person I don't like being around, and it's difficult to explain, but I notice it immediately. Someone who is never at fault, even for stupid, meaningless things. They almost get an offender bender because they weren't looking, and then it's the car in front's fault. They get a trivia question wrong, and it's a dumb question anyways, or, oh, let me take the time to explain why my answer is better, actually. They tell you they'll show up on time, and then they're late, but it was everyone else's fault. It's like the stubbornness that really old people get, but it starts in small ways when you're young and nobody calls you out on it. Story 18. Interrupts you to mansplain things you know about, totally ignoring you when you say you know this. The same guy in our first FaceTime kept staring at me, licking his lips and repeating, "You sure are looking good." I did not go out on a date with him. A guy I met on a dating app was kind of clingy, but the straw that broke the camel's back was when I told him I would call him after my doctor's appointment, and he proceeded to call my phone every few minutes while I was there. I had to turn my ringer off. Story 19. Pay attention to who their friends are. The people we choose to be around say a lot about us and where we're at. Even if we're just following a familiar pattern, we who choose reflects what our pattern is. I saw a Reddit comment years ago that said, "Don't judge a book by its cover, but be careful about the library it's in." Essentially, get to know someone and give them a fair chance, but watch their actions, patterns, and who they choose to surround themselves with. That will reveal whether or not it's the right group for you. Story 20. Being overly complimentary when you first meet them. I have noticed that people who really pour on the compliments tend to be fake and manipulative at best, and straight up sociopathic at worst. For example, "Nice to meet you. I love your shoes. Where did you get them?" is normal. "Oh my god, your style is amazing. You have to take me shopping sometime and give me tips. You are way more stylish than the other people here. As soon as I saw you, I knew I had to hang out with you." Huge red flag. Story 21. When they don't react proportionally to a situation. I remember this one time sitting on the sofa with my ex and I sneezed. He really overcompensated. "OMG, are you okay?" with fake concern in his eyes, and this stuck with me. At the time, it just felt weird. Much later on in our relationship, it occurred to me that he didn't know when to show concern and when not to and to what level, because concern, empathy, didn't come naturally to him. To cut a very long story short, it turned out he was a total predatory, pathological, lying, sicko psychopath. Story 22. How they treat others who they believe are below them or can do nothing for them. Not seeing the state of the world around us and acting in some small way in their own capacity. This is a personal one for me. I don't want to be around people who won't speak up when necessary. Lack of empathy, conflict avoidance. This is something we should all learn to do in a healthy way. Our society perceives a lack of conflict as a type of moral superiority, but being able to voice our views to a friend, partner, colleague, etc. is so important. Dislikes animals, doesn't live in accordance with their stated values. Story 23. As someone who has experienced cruelty, I can say that there are several signs that, although subtle, can reveal a lot if you pay attention to them. That the person always tries to be right, who always wants to get their way in everything. They always impose an opinion and do not accept that other ways of thinking can and should exist. They make fun of your tastes, dreams, appearance, and other things. They always try to belittle you or minimize your achievements even if they're small. They repeatedly minimize you and make you feel bad even though they know it hurts you. They ignore your limits even though you have already communicated to them 1,000 times, and they continue doing what they know bothers you. In general, if they fulfill the first two signals simultaneously, or if they only fulfill number 7, run away from there immediately. Because believe me, you do not want to stick around to find out what happens if those signs come true. Story 24. I have a list. My mom was completely ruthless, so I have learned a lot. Here we go. When someone only says that they love you when you are being completely inauthentic or are uncomfortable with authenticity. When they completely deny the slightest form of criticism and they are never the person to blame. When they blame their emotional state and demand understanding for a crappy action instead of taking responsibility for the action regardless of mood. When they, in the moment, show a lot of understanding when being hurt by them but proceed to not give a crap and talk a lot of crap about you behind your back. When they exaggerate a lot and forget you were there and did not experience the same thing as you did at all. They have very strong opinions but don't even try to respond to other points of view. The list is long, but many small signs together usually indicate a quote-unquote bad person, even though bad is subjective. And the horrible thing is that many bad people usually have a lot of unresolved trauma and feel abandoned in it, which makes me feel bad for even typing this. But I do want to warn people, yes, they do suck and they need to learn. I had to relearn a bunch of relationship skills after my mom passed away. Get it done, stop being the bad person. Story 25. If they say, I'm a good person doesn't announce themselves as such because to a good person, being a good person is the baseline. To a bad person, being a good person is considered an achievement, an accomplishment, something they know deep down they haven't achieved, but they have to pretend they have. They don't understand that it's odd to announce a baseline. It should be a standard to announce I'm a good person as it is to announce the sky is blue. It really is. It shouldn't need convincing. If they feel it needs saying, that means it isn't true. Story 26. The Bad People Hunter Paradox. Here's what bugs me about that whole thread. We've become obsessed with spotting quote-unquote bad people instead of just learning how to deal with flawed humans. Now think about it. If you're constantly scanning everyone for red flags, you're basically walking around with your guard up 24/7. That's exhausting and probably ends way more potential friendships than it saves you from. Look, maybe the person who doesn't return their cart is going through a divorce. Maybe whoever keeps interrupting has ADHD. Maybe that rude server is working their third shift to pay for their mom's cancer treatment. But we've trained ourselves to write people off based on these little behavioral snapshots. And honestly, the stuff that triggers us most usually says more about our own baggage than about them. People who are constantly hunting for narcissists often act pretty narcissistic themselves, always playing moral referee, zero empathy for why someone might be having an off day, obsessed with being right about everyone's character. Maybe instead of asking, how do I spot toxic people, we should ask, how do I get better at dealing with imperfect people? Because here's the kicker, the biggest red flag might actually be someone who's always looking for red flags in everyone else. Story 27. For older folks, if your friends are constantly telling you their children's problems, making it seem as if they're just a problem child and they're such an overwhelmed and overworked parent being taken advantage of, it's possible your friend may be a narcissist and mentally mistreating those kids. A tell is they never update you with something good to say, unless it's backhanded. Doesn't go for everyone, but growing up, I was the scapegoat for everything and no one understood me but my siblings because my parents were totally different people in public. They're not venting to you as a friend, they're seeking validation of their treatment of their kids. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 28. Never admitting a mistake or fault without a caveat. My little brother is a serial domestic criminal. He has ended a cat and claims to be the victim of mine and my mother's cruel life when I was a kid because, quote, he had to watch. My father favored him. Anytime he's called out for something he did wrong, it's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have hit her, but what was I supposed to do? She cheated on me. I don't know, man. Not beat her up, leave her, have a conversation about it if you were invested in the relationship. Maybe don't end the cat because it pooped on your floor. We've been estranged for years after my wife and I took in a friend who had a new baby because he had personal beef with said buddy, which revolved around a fight in a car I wasn't there for. I am racked with guilt for any atrocities I've committed and I own them, and I don't claim to be a good person, but I try to be every day. But at least have the capacity to say, I'm sorry, without the but. Story 29. This is a remarkably good and difficult question about subtle signs. First of all, what defines a quote-unquote bad person apart from the obvious things? Let's assume the person isn't a criminal. People can be very annoying and backstabbing in one setting and very nice in other settings. The work/home difference is a good example. There are people who do unethical things to reach their goal at work, but once home, they can be loving parents, great neighbors, doing lots of charity work, etc. Does that make them bad people? No, it's good people doing bad things. Also, most people have reasons for their behavior, so there is a difference between behavior and having an actually rotten core. For example, you shouldn't steal a television, but if you do it to give it to your elderly neighbor since her TV broke down and no one has money to replace it, well, the action is bad, but the person means well, so this person is seen as a criminal, but is definitely not a bad person at the core. So, having established that usually people aren't bad people in general, that leaves us with the actual bad people, people who are actually evil and don't care about others and do despicable things. The problem is that these people don't have subtle signs. They have huge red flags everywhere. You will recognize them immediately. And then, here comes a twist. The truly evil people, the serial type, are often too smart to show signs most of the time. They are masters of deception. How often have we heard the neighbors talk about living next to a serial criminal and not noticing anything? So your question is almost impossible to answer, but having years of experience working, you tend to see and recognize certain behaviors. A few examples. Gossiping to you and befriending you, making you feel like a confidant. Well, you can be sure they will gossip about you too. Is it a bad person? No, just not my cup of tea. I don't like gossiping. Oh wait, I actually have one, a proper one. People with Machiavellian characters will do everything to reach their goal. So look for the subtle signs like different behavior in different settings, different treatment of people, different wording, different clothes even. After more than 25 years working, I became a victim of one of those people very recently. I didn't notice anything. She even came to the house and held our newborn. She said everything I needed to hear from my employer, and then suddenly, out of the blue, she became hostile. I confronted her, gave her feedback, and then she no longer needed me, tried to fire me for ridiculous, made-up fake reasons. And these people have no conscience. They will do anything. Another subtle warning sign are people that seem to have something going on all the time. They usually are lying about half of it, and it's never their fault. Trouble always happens to them. Those are the manipulators. They will play you until they have what they want, usually money. Also learn this the hard way. For example, problems with the landlord, problems with the systems, problems with the ex, problems with the daughter being teased, problems with money, one story better than the other, then problems with parents, with employers, etc., etc. Always the most crazy stories you tend to believe because you can't make this stuff up. And, well, we all have moments in our lives where piles of trouble come at you at the same time, but in these cases, there's always something and they always need something to fix that something. Anyway, eager to read more of this from others. Story 30. I once had a friend come to town and spend time with me for her birthday weekend. My boyfriend and I took her and a friend who tagged along to a sushi dinner. We covered the cost for both of them and bought a cake for her. Prior to coming, she had sent me a link to buy gourmet cupcakes that she wanted and was disappointed I didn't order those instead. I felt that was a bit much. We went to a club to party and got a table, alcohol, etc. I had another friend who happened to be in town the same night who also had her own table, so we all partied together. When it was time to pay the tab, she and her friend left the club without telling me, leaving the check for my boyfriend and me to pick up. My boyfriend said that was disrespectful for her to expect a free ride all weekend, especially since we never had that type of close friendship. I would have paid for her portion, but this rubbed me the wrong way. She and I parted ways the next morning cordially. I didn't say a word. A few months later, I received a birthday card in the mail from her with a simple happy birthday message. I had no problem celebrating her, but my history of being generous was taken advantage of in the most disrespectful way. Friendship over. Story 31. The way they treat their spouse or talk to them and how they treat their children. I have a friend whose husband constantly criticizes her and makes her feel terrible. We went out for a girls' night, and he was our driver. She's a bigger person, but was trying so hard to lose weight and be healthier. As soon as we drove off, he started telling her how heavy she looks, and I said she looked so beautiful. He was saying things, and she was laughing it off nervously and downplaying him like he was just kidding. I just know he is a terrible human and likely a pure narcissist. Story 32. Here is the fixed text with corrected spelling and clearer language. Passive-aggressive behavior, entitlement, being offensive to others, constant teasing, considering it as funny, but it's actually hurtful to the other person. Gossip/complaining, manipulative/gaslighting, constantly reminding someone of their mistakes/embarrassing situations. These are just some of the subtle signs my friends and I missed during our friendship with another girl. We thought it was just her personality at first, so we never gave it any thought. Until she turned out to be a sadistic person years later on who emotionally tormented our mutual friend. And boy, the thrill she seemed to get out of it. She really messed my friend up, but kudos to her for being resilient through it all. Long story short, we cut off ties with this two-faced monster, and she's living in denial like nothing happened and that she never admitted to anything. Story 33. After years of interacting with garbage people on the internet, I have learned their tale. Bad people can fake all manner of political position or argument, but the one thing they cannot fake is empathy. The trait underpinning all their other failures as a human are that they simply lack the capacity to look at someone experiencing hardship they themselves are not currently experiencing and think, I can appreciate why that person would be unhappy with this burden, and I understand how I would want this to change if I were them. This manifests very subtly if you aren't looking for it. However, if you are wise to look for it, you'll notice it in how they specifically phrase things. For example, they might acknowledge that a group of people are suffering as a result of a policy or event, but they will then move right past it without considering it in the overall picture. They'll always recognize suffering when it visibly occurs, but it will never inform any conclusions they reach. You can test this by asking them directly to display empathy through something as simple as asking them if they agree a person is right to feel hurt by an action taken against them. A reasonable person has no problem agreeing to this because it's ostensibly fair, but they will pivot or get defensive because they have internalized being empathetic to strangers as abhorrent and are manifestly unable to perform it. Story 34. Their nonverbal reactions when others are speaking can help show you the type of person they really are. Do they roll their eyes or yawn while the other person is talking? Do they turn their back on the speaker? Do they appear antsy, like they're really not listening but are just waiting to jump in, most likely to change the subject and make it about themselves? Nonverbal communication can give you a lot of details that the person themselves isn't even aware of they're conveying. Story 35. Devaluing others to inflate themselves is a pattern that shows in various ways. Making jokes at someone else's expense, being rude to people they perceive as lesser than, talking about being disrespected for the smallest things, talking someone else down to make themselves appear superior, entitlement at the expense of fair play for everyone, referring to themselves as high value or alpha, being so stuck on one end of the political spectrum that anyone on the other side is an invitation to an argument about who's better. I find that these people want to be the biggest fish in the pond, will feel resentment at best or be aggressive at worst toward anyone who threatens their hierarchy and are self-absorbed. Story 36. When every problem in their life is caused by quote-unquote trauma, and therefore it's not their fault, and if you have a problem with their behavior, you shouldn't because they're trying their best. If other people have a problem with them, it's because the other people weren't fair and are actually the ones having a problem for no reason. Meanwhile, dealing with them is like playing Minesweeper. If you do something they don't like, it's retroactively a boundary, despite never being communicated to you or anyone else beforehand, but you should have known somehow. I should have walked away the moment the phrase, being called a narcissist is a trigger for me because it's a stereotype of people with BPD to be called that, came up. Well, if the shoe fits, totally not targeted at anyone I know, personally. Story 37. Sometimes the red flags aren't in what they say, but in what they don't say or how they make you feel. Pay attention to how they treat people they don't need to impress. If it's always blame, always criticism, and never empathy, that's a tiny but clear warning sign. Another one is if they have this weird pattern of making everything about them. Not just a little ego, I mean like they can't celebrate anyone else's wins without somehow turning it back to themselves. That kind of self-centered energy usually bleeds into relationships eventually. Story 38. When they are super friendly and helpful without knowing you, and then under the pretense of friendship, start asking you to do things for them that are unethical. For example, I had a coworker who was extremely friendly and helpful to new people on the team. He would take it upon himself to train you even though that was not his role, but because administration was lacking, no one would ever get trained. He then slowly but surely started finding new hires as weaknesses and would go to our boss to speak negatively about the new hires. He wanted to be seen as kind and a team player, but all he was doing was making sure no one outshone him. He would gain new hires' trust by pretending to be some kind of mentor, but just later to betray them and look good in the eyes of administrators. An example, there was this one new girl on the team whom he started quote-unquote training. He would bring her coffee during her first week and would encourage and praise her during team meetings. She confided in him that she hated her previous job and that she left because she was struggling with her mental health. Everyone seemed to really like her, and he was jealous, so he went to our boss and said, "We need to be careful with the new girl because she said her last job made her struggle with her mental health, and she's too sensitive for this type of job." He also asked her to please let him know who was criticizing him and to go over files she was not supposed to access. Story 39. My daughter is traveling with someone she recently met at college. This person is wealthy and entitled and treats waitstaff poorly. My daughter feels like she needs to apologize to the staff after every meal. She finally started suggesting, let's not eat together. When my daughter was telling me about it, it sounds like the quote-unquote bad person girl actually has some decent qualities. She's just not self aware and feels like she's helping or giving good advice to the waitstaff, not actually treating them terribly, still a red flag. Story 40. I know several people who pride themselves on being jokesters and making people laugh. I include myself here. The subtle difference, though, between good and bad people here comes from how they joke. Good people, like me, I do my very best, will mostly make inoffensive jokes, jokes at their own expense, or comments that elevate someone else's joke. Bad people will relentlessly make other people feel like they are being laughed at. They will joke at others' expense. They will use insults as comedy without it being either funny or coming from a place of love. I have two best friends and a few very close friends. Those are the only people I will ever joke at the expense of, and it has to be the right circumstance and the right joke. As an example, my best friend is streaming a game and I'm on a call with him to provide voice acting and jokes. We always have fun. He misses a parry, a very minor thing, and comments, oops, damn, himself. Because I make sure to always praise him and hype him up when he's doing well, it's so much more funny once to slip in a, wow, you suck at that moment. And that's the thing, he streams for roughly 5 hours, and in all of those 5 hours, I only give such an insult joke once. The rest of the time, I make sure to yes and his jokes and do my best to make him laugh. We used to have someone in the group who would also join for voice acting and hanging out. He would always do insults and comedy based off of the mistakes the rest of us made. He would often play to the audience instead of playing to his friends. He'd use us as scapegoats and undermine us just to make a joke to make himself look good. And that's a subtle difference, as most people didn't notice until someone pointed it out to his face that they felt that he didn't like them. Story 41. It's a common saying that to know whether another person is good, you should share a meal, travel, or do business with him or her. If they are only concerned with their plate, don't care for your trouble or need, like you need water or some help with the luggage, and he or she doesn't help, and in a deal they do not keep their word, cheat, or steal, then it shows that person is not suitable as your friend. In short, a selfish, insensitive, arrogant person is not a good person. You can also see how he or she talks about others. If they are not forgiving of the tiny mistakes of others, then they are insensitive. Story 42. They get caught up over shoulds. Some people get really obsessed over how they should feel like life should go for them, how people should behave, and what they should care about. It was from a place of trauma and fear, but it hurt everyone around him. Obsessing over feeling like a victim caused him to become a bully to people who tried to care about him. Nothing was ever enough because his world of shoulds was too important. You may feel compelled to help someone struggling and feeling like a victim, but often it is their own consequences that they refuse to learn and grow from. People like that may treat you like a support at the beginning, but no matter what you do, they will begin resenting you for these shoulds eventually, and you get lumped in with all the other things they are angry at. Story 43. I once worked with a guy, really nice guy for the most part, but something was off. I never thought about it too much, but one day my other colleague sat with me in the canteen and just said, I hate that guy. I asked why. He just said, because if I've been to Tenerife, he's been to 11erife. And this is the best quote I've ever heard, and it hit me like a truck. Every time you told him anything, he would always outdo your story, and I couldn't stop noticing it afterward. I would be like, I got a 50-pound tip, and then he'd say, that's great, man, I got a 75-pound tip too. I don't necessarily think he was a bad person, but he had something where he had to win. I love that quote to this day, and it really taught me to let people have their wins. I met a really nice elderly Airbnb host earlier this week. He was super proud of his YouTube channel. I, of course, asked for the channel, and he showed me 2,000 subscribers. I have a significantly larger channel but decided not to tell him and just ask if I could watch some of his videos. And that quote has definitely made me a more likable person. Story 44. Any bad character traits just ruin their reputation. I guess one is like they can't take criticism, jokes, or anyone else's opinions. I had a friend who I got into a massive empty fight with over the gym, all because that's all I would really talk about. This was in high school, nothing else was happening. And he legit accused me of using performance enhancers and called me delusional/immature. He even called me an uncultured swine over a joke I made about an F1 car sounding like a broken electric guitar at someone's birthday. Story 45. When a girl accuses you of being too close to a male work colleague, for clarification, my male friend and I are like siblings and we both have partners with whom we are committed. But when you look closer, wondering about the criticism, well, perhaps she doesn't want people to notice how she's getting closer and closer to the married guy at work. They are never apart whenever I see them. She even broke up with her boyfriend of 6 years not long ago, and the married guy still has his wife, who doesn't seem to have a clue how they act at work. But yes, if someone's up to no good, don't be surprised if they try to deflect it onto someone else to avoid being noticed. Also, she would make a big deal making sure everyone hears how she's some kind of ally to the less fortunate, which is a joke when she's just a privileged girl with a privileged background. And the one foreign autistic work colleague is the one she throws under the gossip bus and suggests maybe I should pursue a different career. The audacity, right? LOL. Maybe she should stop pursuing married men and trying to act morally superior. I don't know if it's subtle, but she seemed like a good person at first, but looking back, I noticed how hard she tried to construct that facade of niceness. Story 46. Being overly helpful out of the blue. One colleague at work, we weren't close, just chatted a bit in the office, nothing more. Let me know his team had an open position, so I was like, okay, thanks, I'll apply. But he wrote me a recommendation letter, referred me to this position, and was telling me how much he wanted to help. It seemed like too much effort for someone he didn't know that well, but I just thought he was a cool guy, wanting to help. I ended up not getting hired, and he seemed upset about the news. It was a bit too much for someone in that situation. Then, about half a year later, I learned that he had been very mistreating to a female colleague when they were dating in the past and was generally a really troubled person. I'm a guy, so I don't know what exactly his personal motivation was for getting me onto his team, but now I'm much more cautious when someone seems disproportionately willing to help me. Story 47. I think it takes a lot for someone to be a bad person. Most of the time, we judge others in ways that are relative to our own experiences, even when we believe we're being objective. And yes, I've been told that this makes me naive when it comes to noticing these subtle signs. In my opinion, the focus should be less on looking for red flags and more on noticing how their behavior affects you. That is, how much more poor behavior are you willing to tolerate because you decide to walk away? In therapy, I've been working on boundaries and realizing that I often give too much leeway, which takes a toll on my nervous system. If your body starts showing signs of stress, it is time to step back. Story 48. The only major one I can really think of that hasn't been said is unreasonable hatred of cats. Seriously, if someone seems completely normal but has an unreasonable hatred of cats, then 9 times out of 10 there is something going on with them. Controlling people hate cats for enforcing boundaries and not being blindly loyal like a dog. Jealous people hate that cats take attention away from them. People who wish to harm others often see cats as an easy target and justify it by making cats out to be vermin. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone who loves cats is a good person, and it's not necessarily exclusive to cats either. I've met some people who really hated dogs, and they were not great people either. But for some reason, it feels like cat hatred specifically is more normalized, and so I feel cat hatred qualifies as a more subtle red flag than dog hatred. And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.